Yeah, we're talking about the history of English literature, and so far we covered the uh, whole 16th century. As just moving forward towards the 17th century, we know that after the Elizabethan age, we can see there is a bit decline, or there is a bit cliche in the literary stuff. In that case, we can take the uh, example of the decline of the drama after the Queen Elizabethan age. In 1603, as we know that Queen Elizabeth died, and King James I, who actually the um, King James I, who was uh, King, King Jacob of the sixth Scotland. England. In that case, as we go forward and see the uh, involvement of the King James first in the literary stuff, it's bit yeah, King James sixth of the Scotland, who became the King James first of the England, and he involved in too much literary mm, changes of the time, or let's say the one who had uh, lead the position by taking initiative as an translator, or let's say the one creator of the new English Bible, King James first. Okay, this was the period where we can see that the new Stuart dynasty is started. So that is the second thing which we have to keep in our mind while studying. That is, Queen Elizabeth was the last Tudor king, and afterwards we have King James first as a uh, King James first. From King James first we have Stuart dynasty. So hope these all things are clear. The next thing which I would like to talk about, that we already had discussed the Jacobin dramatist, in that sense that how Ben Jonson's and the other contemporary dramatist uh, in the Jacobin age, they had played their role, and how they just come up with the mm, new kind of sensation, that is we can call as a comedy of errors. Comedy of errors? No. So yeah, that is the one stuff. But uh, these are the people who had made a kind of experiment with the uh, comedy, and they just come up with the tragicomedy kind of stuff. And you can see that as it goes forward, we can check out the Jacobean England, and Jacobean England specifically. This was the stuff where we can find that this was the period where English had started widen their horizon. Okay, in that case, we can take the example of the colonial expansion of the period, like permanent expansion of the English race overseas was took place under the King James first. In that case, colonies in Virginia, New England, and West Indian islands was formed, like Barbados and coast of Hindustan. These people called it. Okay, we'll come it to later. Mm, but the first requisite thing for this one, that was the peace which was fulfilled in the period, and we can find the expansion of the literature was based on this also. So in that case, I would like to tell you some 3 to 4 things which were very important regarding to the literature. In that case, in today's lecture, we're going to talk about the expansion of colonies, that is the colonial expansion under the reign of King James first, then some background to this one, and how these all things leads to the one dominant genre of the age, that is the prose. Okay. uh, Translations, we'll talk about the features of the Jacobean prose. One of the best of it, that is the translations. Then we're going to talk about some travel tales, and we're going to talk about 2 to 3 important prose writers of the age, and if we got the time, we'll move towards the poetry of the age, which was dominated by the two cults of the poets. First one are the Spenserian poets, okay, and the second ones are the metaphysics or metaphysicals. So we'll this is the outline of today's class. We'll start with yeah, Jacobean England specifically. As I told you, these people, they were eager to permanent expansion of the England race overseas under the kingship of King James First, and they found their own colonies in the different areas of the world. Okay. When we just try to find out the reasons behind these expansions, these are the different ones, but the government maintained the conditions, that is peace and sovereignty in the private space, or by using this private enterprises supplied the initiative money and men, ships and equipments, and promoters like nobles, wealthy subjects. So these people, those who belongs to the England at that time, we can see they are very ambitious people, and they just try to find out new land for the trade. Okay, why these people become so eager to just go and find out these new places for the trade? So this is big why in front of us. um, there were several reasons behind it, but for these mm, expansions, we can find there were several private enterprises supplied the initiative money and men, like ships and equipments, and uh, we can see some promoters over there, like nobles and wealthy subjects of the time, who they were just like, they played a kind of big gamble on it. Okay, we have taken example of the Merchant of Venice, written by the William Shakespeare, where we can find that Antonio played a gamble, like he just spent his ships on the in the sea, and till they come back, he borrowed some monies from the Shylock. So that was the same scenario we can find over here, as the colonial expansion was one of the major aspect of the age. At that time, we can see that these nobles and the wealthy subjects of the time, they had borrowed, or let's say they invested their money in these kind of new, what we can say, in the new developments or new land searching. Okay, so trading companies were there to distant parts of the world. So what they have done, they just went to the distant part of the world and try to find out new land. Okay, as that was the period where India was very famous for its cuisines and uh, its jewelry and all kind of stuff. So these people, they were looking for the India, and that's why we know that it was the Gama in the search of India, uh, come to the west coast of India. It was the later thing, but yeah, this was happening. Then there were several London companies who financed and organized this migration. One of them, example given, that is the Virginia Company, and then very famous, we all have an idea about it, that is the East India Company. We'll come to it later. Then the 100 Years Wars, the first is instructive gesture to reduce France to an English province, and that's why this clash between the France and England was a move in these in this realm also, or what we can say in this area also, where these two countries were tried to establish their own dominance. Okay, and that's why there were several things that is created a permanent market. Means as we just move forward and try to find out the reasons, that's big why these countries are looking for the new lands or new trading areas, because they just want to create a permanent market for English goods. Okay, and which of the products of the new word they want to explore. In that case, we can take the example of the plantations in Virginia, like these tobacco plantations in Virginia. Even as we have studied in India's struggle for freedom, these Britishers, they tried to uh, produce too much cotton in India, and they just bring it back to the London or to the England, and they just got too much profit. That's the different stuff. Okay, so that's why there were this colonial expansion was taking place, and these patriotic and religious motives behind it are the another stuff. So as the one thing which I have told you, that is the permanent create a permanent market for the English goods. Second very important example of this colonial expansion, why these people went for the colonial expansion, is the patriotic and religious motives. Okay, in that case, in part self-regarding and economic, uh, and in part ideal and religious. So on the one hand we can find these were self-regarding and economic scene behind these people's thought process of getting a new land or the searching a new land. On the second one, the part ideal and the religious stuff also, so they just want to expand the Christianity, and we can see that they just want to spread this Catholicism over the world, and that's why uh, this was comes under these religious motives kind of stuff. So patriotic and religious motives we can find over here. To obtain a land, that was the most important thing. Even in near future we can find, in near past we have seen that is uh, England was reign over the different countries in the world. ते असं म्हणतात की इंग्रजांच्या साम्राज्यावरचा सूर्य कधी ढळत नव्हता. And yes, it was started in King James first period. Okay. So what I want to give you one kind of mm, statics, that is in 1630 to 1643 there were 2 lakh pounds, 2 lakh pounds and 20,000 people to New England in 200 ships plus 40,000 1,400 more immigrants to Virginia and other colonies. So even though these people had started trading the different countries and the different places, some of the immigrants or some money has been invested to New England, and several people, several ships, several equipments were getting used there. So this was the stuff, and the product of it we can find that this was the period where too much religious kind of literature has been written. As we just move forward towards the literary stuff of the age, we can find the feature of, when we talk about the Jacobean age, King James First reign. Um, the After the drama, the second prominent genre in the literature is prose. So, which kind of prose has been written? Translations, science and learning, human psychology and behavior, religious writings. These are the four areas: translations, science and learning, human psychology, and behavior, religious. Hope it is getting my point. Yeah. So let's talk about the Jacobean prose. So these are the four arenas where the Jacobean prose were based on. So mm let's talk about this one. This was the period where several types of prose has been discovered, or we can say they became the popular. The first one is travelers tales. Okay, so when I talk about the travelers tales, they talks about the, so uh, when you talk about the travelers tales, any wild guess why travelers tales became famous in this period? As we talk about the spirit of adventure, this was the period where many voyages took place in search of new countries, new land, and new market. These English dominant people or the English voyagers, what they have done, they just made too much adventures, or let's say they just went on the travel in this period, and as some of them they just come back, they write down or they wrote down their own experiences and it became the traveler's tales. And as this was a kind of their own experiences, they have given the example of the spirit of adventures. um, this was the period where geography, history of the world, and maps were studied a lot, because yeah, motive is the motive is clear, as these people just want to explore the different places. They must have to go through the geography and history of the world, specifically maps. Hmm. And that's why these indigenous, these all indigenous items has been used, like geography, history of the world, and the map, mm, some writings, travelogues, experiences of the travelers, and these people try to find out it for their own development, or let's say for to just chase the world and get something new through it. Okay. um, in this was the period where we can find these pamphlets on education, knowledge, wisdom, culture, and social conditions has been increased. In that case, we can take the example of the Francis Bacon, one of the famous person who associated with this age and who had wrote his essays, which are we can say one of the fabulous piece of the literature. Pamphlets on education, knowledge, wisdom, culture, social conditions has been written a lot. Why? Because as we have seen that the Jacobean prose were revolving around these four topics, and the things which I'm telling you right now, like pamphlets on education, knowledge, wisdom, culture, social conditions, then the sermons, preachings, okay, value addition, these all things comes under this stuff, that is science and learning. um, as I told you, Francis Bacon is one of the famous name in this regard. This was the period where biographies and autobiographies write autobiography writing increased. Okay, that was comes under this period, let's say this type of literature. Okay, so biographies and autobiographies, why this stuff increase? Again, people, they got the wisdom, they got knowledge, and they feel this sense of remembrance, like someone has to know, someone has to take inspiration from the great people, and for that purpose their autobiographies or their character writings, uh, biographies were written down in this period. Yeah, character books was the one of the new types in this period. Character books, that's the types. Yeah, nothing different, but yes, different characters were no, not mandatory whether they are original or whether they were imaginary characters, but yeah, several characters were produced in this period. Some of them they were written down. Okay, in that case you can take the example of Dr. Faustus. Okay, university bits, we had studied the university bits, but still uh, in university bits, Christopher Marlowe had come up with the one character book, or let's say the type of work that which we can describe as the Dr. Faustus. So Dr. Faustus comes under this category, that is the character book. So this is the important stuff regarding with the translations, or let's say the prose of the age. Okay. In that case, we had talked about the translations in our last lecture, when we had talked about the King James first. King James first was the person who himself translated the Bible, the English of this period, and he has given a motivation to write down these translations, which were comes under several translations, which comes under the category called religious writing. So another thing comes under this one, that is the metaphysical poetry. When we'll talk about the metaphysical poetry, I'll tell you the same stuff. Yeah. So hope you're just getting these points. These we had talked about the different areas which were famous in this period, but as we're dealing with the Jacobean prose, okay, we must have to take the one famous name in this regard, and this name is of Francis Bacon. So Francis Bacon in front of you. Time frame almost contemporary to the William Shakespeare, 1561 to 1626. This was his time frame. Francis Bacon is called the father of